like, is there like a reason why nobody's done this? Because I'm like, it just seems like if you really boil it down, that there's fundamentally better ways to do it. Our focus is definitely like come up with what we think is the right foundation for a product, and then just like improve, improve, improve.
Hey friends, Devin here with Backcountry Exposure. Today I sit down with Dan Durston for a video podcast interview to really pull back the curtain of Durston Gear and dig into Dan's brain around gear design, his philosophy and approach to his business and designing gear, and why he does things the way he does. It's a really interesting conversation that I had a ton of fun with. So I hope you enjoy it. So let's go ahead and jump right into it right now. Dan Durston, man, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and coming on to talk about Durston Gear and kind of the exciting things that you're working on with some new products that you've released and some other things coming out, plus all of your legacy gear. So yeah. Thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's a lot of cool stuff happening.
What has Dan been up to for 2024? What kind of adventures and things have you been on besides designing gear and that
on
stuff?
A personal level? Yeah. I'm a sucker for the Great Divide Trail. It's this big trail up the Rockies. Everyone should hike it. It's amazing.
I'm not sure I've ever heard of that. No,
it is. Yeah. Like for those who haven't, it's like basically the Canadian Continental Divide Trail, the Canadian CDT, runs up the Rockies, 700 miles. And the cool thing about it is that it's like true wilderness in like most of it's true wilderness. Like everybody throws around the wilderness word, and like, they get out of sight of the street, out of sight of the street, and they're like, it's the wilderness. And you're like, yeah, not really. Like, but there's some like legit wilderness where you will not see people. Like I've gone a week without seeing a person. It's just like compared to the PCT, which is awesome. We love the PCT, but it's like you're gonna see like people like every hour of like your summer. So anyways, on the Great Divide Trail, I like hiking it, but somehow I got the bug of like working on it, which is terrible because it's never ending. Like the trail's never going to be like perfect. So
what do you mean by like working on it?
I lead trail building trips on it. So we have one in 4 weeks.
Cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Like there's this one valley where there was this historic trail. It was like used by indigenous peoples, like for like however like time memorable. And then early explorers, like some of the icons of the Rockies, like all those people were through this trail. And then it got messed up by logging in the 1980s. And people kind of forgot about it. It wasn't ever GPSed. And then people were taking this other road around. But I kind of heard about it on some old maps and was like, went to check it out. And like the trail was mostly still there. Like it took a while to really fully find it and GPS it because you lose it. Some areas are pretty bad, but you like keep scouting and you find pieces and you connect the dots. So the last 3 years I've been working on restoring this with the association. So we have grants. Cool. We have like a First Nations partner. We have like volunteers. And so we're going out there in a week. It'll be the third year of like 10 to 20 people working on it. That's about 10 miles, this connection. And it's cool because it's just getting off road and into like this trail with so much history. So I'm leading that this summer and another trail building trip on the northern part of the GDT. And then I've got all these like terrible hikes planned because I'm trying to hike every trail in the Canadian, on this side of the Canadian Rockies, but they have really stopped maintaining it. They've scaled it back, and I've kind of hiked all the good ones. So now it's like I'm doing this hike that the last trip report was from 1971, and it was like, this trail's bad. And now it's like 50 years later, and we're like, let's go hike this thing. So it's me and another guy. I just love the history. Like it's so cool. So even if the trail sucks, you're like, man, like people were like walking in this path, like, for centuries, and it's just got so much history. So
that's cool.
Yeah. Right now that's what I'm doing.
What I want to talk about really today is gear and kind of approach it from the mindset of designing gear and how you approach that aspect of Durston Gear. Cause you're not a huge company. It's like you and your wife and your kid, right?
Yeah. My brother started working here too now. So we got a few people, but it's still tiny.
Cool. Yeah. Super, super small, which I think adds a lot of, like people enjoy that mom pop kind of approach to things, but you're putting out gear that is wildly popular. And I mean, there's an entire Facebook group that just, I think is probably one of the most active Facebook groups in the outdoor space. It's crazy. the
Yeah,
amount
it's
of
crazy.
activity that's on there.
When our polls launched last week, there was like more activity in that group than the whole ultralight backpacking group for like the whole scene combined.
Yeah. That was like, grab the bucket of popcorn
Yeah,
and hang out and see see what people are posting. I did
yeah,
not realize, we won't rabbit hole on this, but how strong the opinions on both sides are of straps or no straps on trekking poles. That was amazing.
yeah. I underestimated how passionate people are too. I was kind of relieved though, like there's so much drama, and then when there's drama, you're kind of like, oh no, like this is
Yeah.
stress. But at the same time, it's debating like whether or not a certain feature should exist, which is
Hmm.
like, okay, we can add that feature, as
Yeah.
opposed to like debating like, oh, the core design is stupid or like that's going to fall apart, like a core problem. It's just like a feature. So in that
Right.
sense, I was
Right.
like, sure, have this debate, and then we'll be responsive.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really interesting about Durston Gear is, even though you're working with factories to produce your products and such, you still have the ability to do a pretty quick turnaround on design changes. And it's not like, well, if we want to change this on the XMID, it's going to be 2 production runs down the road, which could be 12 months to 18 months before you even see that in the field.
Yeah.
You have quicker turnaround on things, right?
Yeah, that's something I'm really passionate about because I'm just like, maybe I'm just insecure about our gear, but I'm like, I always want to make it better. And so one way we can do that is not having retailers. If we had a retailer, we would sell the gear to them. They would want like the season to sell it. Like they bought it for the summer. So if like
Right.
halfway through the summer we come out, we're like, oh, it's the new version. They're like, well, now we have this old version. So you're kind of undermining your retailers if you're updating. And then we also are careful with stock just because I don't want to like order a whack of stuff and then it's like, oh, now it's 2 years. And then somebody emails us with this great idea and we just like can't do it forever. So
Yeah.
we're kind of, some flip side is sometimes we're sold out of stuff quite a bit, but it lets us like constantly iterate. And that's, yeah, I just can't stop. Our focus is definitely like come up with what we think is the right foundation for a product and then just like improve, improve, improve.
Hmm.
Rather than like, oh, we're going to release like 10 different jackets or like, not that we sell jackets, but like 10 different versions of something, or
Right.
other
Right.
companies will have like, a whole like 20 packs or something and we'll have like two.
Has there been ever been a time with any of the products where you made a design change on it and you were like, that was a bad idea, and you came back and
Um,
removed it? Or has everything been pretty sequential in a positive change to the product?
we've had a few that are a little more debatable. Like early on, the vents, it's pretty trivial, but on the 1 person tent, the vents were on the door. And then the 2 person, I was like, oh, maybe it's better on the end. So I put them on the end. And then there's like these two different ways, and people were kind of confused because they would see tents each way and think they had the wrong one, but it was just a difference between the two models.
Oh,
One way
gotcha.
wasn't really better. It was just like we were kind of stuck in this, like, well, now we have two versions and they have some pros and cons and we're explaining it. So that was like that for like 3 years. And then finally in the last year, we just were like, okay, let's just like pick because like we just like, let's pick one. So I did that. In terms of actually backtracking, one thing that I can think of would be the tensioners on our corners. In 2019, we had line lock threes. I went to this
Hmm.
other tensioner. I think it was a little irrational. I was testing them, and I was like, "Oh, this other one is actually like quite a bit stronger,"
I
which was
see. I
true,
see.
but it was maybe irrelevant because the first one was strong enough that it wasn't really failing. So it wasn't really a problem.
Oh.
We went to the stronger one. The line lock threes will break at like 45 pounds. This other one breaks at like 120. So we're like, "Oh, that's cool." But then but then the line lock threes aren't breaking for anybody, and the other one is like more prone to kind of getting a little like tangled, and you kind of have to like
Oh,
fiddle with it a
okay.
little bit more. So we had like a couple of years of people just complaining our tensioners were like a bit hard to use, and then eventually we're like, for 2024, we went back to the line lock threes. They're just like the old standard. Everyone uses them, and they work great. And the kind of the rationale I had for changing just that's one of the kind of the core problems with gear design is like, are you solving a real world problem, or are you
Hmm.
solving like, an academic problem or some problem that you perceive to be more important than it is? And in that one, I was solving a problem that didn't really exist.
The idea of like designing gear is what kind of problems can you solve, right?
Right.
Like what issue is there in the area of tents, and how do I create a product that solves that issue?
One thing that I do that I think feels kind of maybe like obvious or sounds obvious, but I don't think it's actually done that much, is that I think a lot of designs don't start from the beginning. And I call this our like first principles philosophy. But basically I feel like a
Okay.
lot of designs start from like the dominant forms that are on the market today, and then you evolve something. It's like a feature, or you change something and you try to make some aspect better, but maybe you haven't like dug right down to the foundation and been like, but why is it like that? Like, what is the core thing we're trying to do here? So with the X mid, and I can give a few examples, but with the X mid, before I ever like really conceived of like the specific tent, I was thinking about what I perceive to be the most core question is how many sides the base is going to have. Like, is it going to be a rectangle, a triangle, a 5-sided, a 6-sided? Because all of these have implications that just are going to ripple through the whole rest of the design in complexity and in weight and all these kind of things. So I'm like, what is the starting point here? And you think about that and you like, there's pros and cons, and eventually you reach some conclusion that you think is pretty solid. And I had really settled on the rectangle. Triangles are like, they're going to be weird. There's some, I won't get into what happens when you like try to build a tent on a triangle, but I think the rectangle works. And so then I was like, that's the starting point that I want. And so that's like one
Okay.
parameter. And what I try to do is what I would call like parameterize my kind of search, in the sense that there's a million different things you could do. And so then you're like, well, like, oh, we could do this, we could do that, we could do that. Like I don't know. But if you aren't like focusing that somehow, you're just going to do like most of the things that you could do are mediocre. But what are like the great ones? And how do you find those?
Hmm.
Like, how do you search through the possible solution space to find the good stuff? So I would parameterize it. So like with the X-Men, I was like, it's got to be 4 sides. Like way before I ever had the really specific concept, it's got to be 4 sides. It's got to be 2 poles, because I've got 2 poles and it's like, seems like a waste if I'm only using one of them. So then I was like,
Gotcha.
2 poles like that. I was like, it can't have mandatory guidelines, which means it can't be like around the perimeter, because that's going to be a flat wall. So once you parameterize this down and you come up with all these things, then you're actually like going to arrive at kind of the area of solutions. And then you're hoping a
Hmm.
solution exists. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's like, well, these things fundamentally conflict and there is no solution to this problem. Or
Yeah.
maybe you arrive at it and someone else has like done it. You're like, oh, like somebody thought of that last year. Oh, shoot.
I love that. How much of the design concept focuses on the end user, in the idea of like taking shapes, but making shapes work around the human body? Like somebody is spending time in here
Hmm.
meshing those shapes together to make it like usable for that person.
Yeah, I think that with my designs, there's quite a bit of informing from the end user, like from me as a user. I think of it as like on one end of the spectrum, you've got these kind of first principles I was talking about. The end
Uh-huh.
result is a product that's being used, and there's like how it affects the user. And I think that's also like an area that I can add value and improve, because I do camp and hike a lot, and I'm like very picky on how my gear works. What I don't really
Yeah.
have is the middle. Like, how do you get from like, because I don't have a design background, I don't know how to like use all these like fancy softwares and like and all this kind of stuff. So I'm like, okay, I know like the foundation of where we're going to start, and I know where we need to get, but like the process in between is that's kind of can be the difficult thing. Like we can get through that, but it's just
Right.
that's where I don't bring expertise. Whereas traditionally, I think you would have somebody who's from like a design school that maybe doesn't care as much about the foundation. They're just kind of doing what is an accepted form and modifying it on that. So the less focus on the foundation, a little less informed as a user, because they might be more of a professional designer than somebody who really like lives and breathes that activity, but they're like
Yeah.
good at the middle. So we're kind of almost the
Gotcha.
inverse of other companies. I feel like in some ways the like design space is so wide open, because it doesn't it feels I want this to sound like arrogant, but it doesn't feel like some other people are like trying that hard. Like for example, with
Mm.
trekking pole tents, you use your trekking poles, but then you also want a solution for a folding pole because you're going to maybe take it canoeing or bikepacking, or you have other user groups, like kind of secondary uses. So you want a folding pole. And so we were like, okay, well, we need to offer that solution. And then you look at the market and you're like, oh, like nobody actually like from the ground up designed a pole for this function. They're all using tent pole tubing that's designed to flex. And they're mostly not
Oh,
adjustable.
sure.
They're just like flexi tent poles that kind of work. But you're like, if anybody, it's not like you have to be brilliant. You're just like, if anybody like actually tried, they wouldn't think that that's the solution. That's just like the easiest solution. It's not like you really tried. And so then we
Yeah.
like a few years ago came out with our folding pole. It was like the world's lightest one. It was the only one with external adjustment. But, a bunch of stuff is stiffer, and not because we're like brilliant. We're just like actually we're like, well, let's design a product specifically for this use. And now there are
Yeah.
like some other companies
Yeah.
that have come out with it too. And yeah, and anyways, and other products too. I'm just like, well, like if you just think about it, like I'm spanning a lot of topics, but our hiking poles are the same. It came out last week, where I like you would think a hiking pole is this thing that's like exhausted. The number of solutions have been around forever. They're a pole with a handle.
Mm-hmm.
We've been
Mm-hmm.
using them since like medieval times. And yet you boil it down to this first principles basics and you ask questions like how many sections should the pole have? And if you have one, it's not going to be adjustable and it's going to be bulky, but it's the lightest. And if you have like a whole
Yeah.
bunch, it's going to be pack small and but it's going to be heavier. So it's like, well, where's the optimum? And I think the answer for a hiker is 3 because that'll fit on your backpack. And yet if you go like 4 or 5, it's just heavier. So I think the optimum's 3.
Right.
And then if you think about how many adjusters you want, you actually can get all the adjustment you need on one. Like you can adjust from 2/3 to full height. That's all the adjustment you need. So I'm like, why does every single 3-piece pole in the market have 2 adjusters? Like you don't need it. It's just heavier, complicated. It can slip. If you need to adjust it to a certain length, now you're like paying attention to both. So we were just like, well, let's just like do a click mechanism on the bottom one because you don't need that one. You can still fold the
Yeah.
pole there. It's just not going to adjust. And then it's like simpler, lighter. And I'm like, maybe I've overlooked some poles, but as far as I can tell, nobody's done a 3-piece pole with one adjuster, which is like,
Huh.
to me is just like, when you
It
think about
isn't
a pole, you're
also
like, well,
like
that's,
the Z style, like pull apart poles that you see from like Black Diamond or whatever.
yeah, so there's tons of those Z style poles, which is like, so I feel like these two types of poles are converging because you've got your classic 3-piece telescoping hiking pole, and then you've got all these more of kind of coming from the running world, the Z style poles that are also being used for hiking, and they
Yeah.
have the lighter connections, but they're all 4-piece and up. They might seem like some of them
Right.
people
Right.
think they're a 3-piece because they have the upper 2 telescoped together. So if you telescope the upper 2, you'll have 2 more, but it is
Mm-hmm.
like one external and 2 folds to make for a
Yeah.
4-piece pole. And so this is like, okay, well, let's use that simpler, lighter connection, but we don't need a 4-piece. A 3 is fine. And
Right.
so then you're like,
Right.
okay, well, that's simpler and lighter. So in a bunch of these ways, in kind of almost any product category I really think about, I'm like, is there like a reason why nobody's done this? Because I'm like, it just seems like if you really boil it down, that there's fundamentally better ways to do it.
Well, and I've like if we go back a little bit, I do want to talk more about the Iceline poles because
Mhm.
I'm pretty intrigued by that, and we'll move forward to that here in a minute. But I want to go back to what you're saying about like you develop a product, you design it. Why is this additional thing that's necessary for pitching that, in this case a tent like the XMID? It's always been interesting to me that there's so many trekking pole tents out there on the market, but why? Maybe I'm the odd one out thinking this because I've only seen it happen from one company where poles are actually designed and included with the tent with the option of, if you don't want to use the poles that are included, you use your own trekking
Mhm.
poles. Maybe it just increases
Yeah.
cost and unnecessary complexity. But like Sierra Designs is the only tent manufacturer that I've seen that has included poles in their non-freestanding tents with the option of being able to pitch them without
Oh, that's
using their
interesting.
poles.
I think that's interesting. I didn't know they did that. For me, it was like in the early days, I just brand new kind of company. You can only do so much. And so it's like, we'll do the tent and then people can bring their poles. And I also
Yeah.
probably thought at the beginning that poles were probably something that was already optimized. It was like, the best people working on poles for a century, and I'm sure they're dialed in. Why do I want to make a pole that's probably not any better? And it wasn't really until like the last 2 years when I've been like seriously thinking about poles, and I'm like, actually make a pole that I think is better. Because we don't want to, like, we really genuinely, I don't want to do a product that is mediocre. I think, like,
Yeah.
of course we could sell a bunch just because it's an easy add-on with the tent, but it also, I think, would kind of dilute our brand a little bit if it's like, oh, they sell some cool stuff and they sell some, just like, obviously they want to be in that product category, so they just like
Right. Right.
made the standard product kind of thing. So I had a hesitancy just to think, I don't want to just kind of do like another pole that's pretty good. Yeah, for wide, but it does seem like most tent companies would want to do that. It could just be that a lot of the trekking pole tent companies are smaller and maybe don't have the access to the equipment and stuff. Because building a pole is so different than building a tent. Like you're
Right.
basically, you're going to
Yeah.
use like one of the pole factories in the world, and it's very different than a company like building a tent in house, or even just the design process is so different for a pole that they
Right.
just may see it outside
Right.
their kind of area of expertise.
Yeah, and it's that weird like gray area. As a gear reviewer, it's you'll have a brand say like, well, this is the lightest backpacking tent, one person or like fully enclosed tent in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but is that really the case? Because all of the components to be able to pitch that
Mm-hmm.
aren't part of that weight.
Right.
So you need to include the weight of the stakes, you need to include the trekking poles that
Yeah.
then like fluctuates in so many different ways because are you using titanium V stakes? Are you using like 10-inch long groundhog stakes? Like your
It. Yeah.
variance in how heavy something actually is, aluminum trekking poles versus carbon fiber trekking poles. Like so
There's so
it
much. There's tents that need like an extension on the poles too, and then there's like
mhm,
guidelines that you need and ones that you don't need, but you're going to use, and like, yeah, there's so much that goes into it. As a
yeah.
company, that's hard because you can sort of prescribe, like we will say on our website, like a typical setup, but that's still only including like stakes and things, because poles are all over the place for weight. Some
Mhm,
people would say they have them anyways. Some people don't want to count it like that. So you end up
right.
like in these battles where everybody's coming from a different set of kind of assumptions or a different kind of perspective, and
Are
nobody's going to
trekking
agree.
poles are trekking poles worn weight or are they part of your base weight?
Yeah, yeah. Because if you are fully carrying trekking poles, then the tent you could count as the additional. But some people will like buy the trekking
Yeah.
poles when they buy the tent, and yeah. So there's so many scenarios.
Well, I'm interested to. I've got a very specific question I want to ask you, and then we can
Hmm.
talk more about the Iceland Pulse since we're kind of in that realm and it's your newest product. But I think it melds together or mends together pretty well with what I want to ask, and it just comes from the mindset of the X Mid for you is a wildly successful product. It's
Hmm.
become one of the most popular tents in the backpacking space. There's no question about that. And that's amazing. Like I congratulate
Yeah,
you
it's wild. Yeah,
on taking not from what I've heard you tell in stories before that your intent was not to be a gear
I just wanted a
designer.
free tent. Yeah,
You just
just
wanted
wanted
a
to
cool
be.
tent. But the idea of being able to like move on from that opportunity where not everybody that enters the space of design is capable of making their first product as successful as what you've been able to do with it. And how do you branch out from that success? Because sometimes I think it becomes this like tunnel, you get tunnel vision of, well, this was so successful, I have to build off of this. Like
Hmm.
how do you look at tents now as other options of like, hey, the X-Mid, I've got 6 different options between the standard, the solid, and the pro versions.
Hmm.
I want to build another trekking pole tent, but how do I make it as good and as much of a success story as what the X-Mid was without just making another X-Mid? Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Yeah, there's a lot to it. So There is certainly some like tunnel vision type thing where you're like, oh, this product is huge, it's popular, everybody wants this. Like, of course, you're going to keep working on it, but it does like pull you in and take you away from other projects where you might have other things you want to do, but you're like, everybody wants the X-Mid, so I gotta make the Dyneema version and the 2-person version, and like you gotta and also improve it because you're like, oh,
Right.
like it's pretty
Make
good,
it
but like
longer, make it wider.
yeah, there's always the critiques and there's some validity to them. And so you're like, like a first version of the one I thought had enough space, but most people wanted more. So I was like, oh, like I gotta quickly make a new version that's larger that before people are like just onto some other tent that's more spacious. So you
Mm.
do get pulled somewhat into like the tunnel of maintaining that product line. Aside from that, one of the things that I come back to is that before the X-Mid came out, I thought about these like first principles for like years. Like I was thinking about it in 2014 on the PCT all day, every day, 2017 on the Great Divide Trail, like not all day, every day is an exaggeration, but a lot. So
Yeah.
I I think that for what I intended it for, I like really think it's our best solution. So what I don't want to do is change for the sake of change, where I'm just like, oh, let's just like keep it fresh by like doing it different if I don't think different's better. I I do think other tents will come along and they'll probably be the cool thing just because they're new and they're popular and stuff like that. But if I'm right about like these like core fundamental foundational principles being like the best foundation, then
Hmm.
I would hope it would have longevity as a product. And 30 years from now, people are still like, yeah, that's like a great way of doing a trekking pole tent. Whereas if I'm wrong and I'm like, oh man, I didn't realize there was a solution for making like a triangular tent, and it just like that's I totally over had an oversight on that solution. I hope I would be open to that. So as long as I believe that I've got the right foundation for that target, then I would just continue to improve the X-Mid. And other products from us would be aimed at different targets. So for example,
Gotcha.
we could do a one pole tent. I think for like a 2-person tent, I don't think one pole is really enough space. You can put a whole bunch of struts and stuff in there, but I think you're better to use 2. For 1-person tent, I still like 2, but you can make a 1-person tent with one pole.
Yeah.
I don't prefer it myself because I think you've got the second pole usually. Why not add it, get some more space? But there are people that for a bunch of reasons would prefer a one pole tent because they use one pole or they're scared of breaking a pole or whatever it may be, or they just don't want a lot of space and they'd rather it be lighter. So there is like
Yeah.
another market there where it's like the lighter one pole tents. I'm not focusing on that right now, but I could see that if I did do another trekking pole tent, it would probably be aimed either at like a one pole tent for like a different target, or it would be like a bigger tent, like a 3 or 4 P. Once you get to bigger tents, the structure should probably be different. 2 poles
Hmm.
might be enough space for 2 people, but once you're at like 4 people, because you can't really make them taller because trekking poles are only so tall. So
Right.
it's just
Right.
like you're never going to make like a 10-person tent with 2 trekking poles kind of thing. So you're it'd be kind of ridiculous. So, anyways, there are like other trekking pole niches, but for me, I do think that like what we've got is a really good foundation for a trekking pole tent, and mostly in the trekking pole tent space, I'm just going to continue to improve on that. And we do that constantly. Like we've had like 30 updates to those tents in like the last 5 years. We're always like just this week we added like magnets to the interior doors on the 2-person tent, things like that. So
Gotcha.
most of my design will be in new products and new spaces, basically.
I see.
I'm
I
not sure
see.
if I really got to the core of the question. I think I drifted a little bit there, but
Yeah, no, I like it. The follow-up question would have been like, are you working on a new trekking
mhm,
pole tent
mhm.
that is similar in design to the X-Mid? But I guess some of the feedback that I've seen of people sharing their thoughts on the X-Mid or questions and such is like, could the pro version find its way to a single door but still be 2 poles
Mhm.
and reduce the footprint size of it and not have
Mhm.
that extra zipper and all that
Yeah,
space and
we
such.
almost did that. So with the Pro One, so I think like there's as you because I'm kind of aiming at 2 different markets. I'm aiming at like the 1-person and the 2-person. With the
Uh-huh.
2-person market, like 2 doors, 2 vestibules is a pretty good fit. On a 1-person, you can make an argument that you only need one door. There's some advantages, but you can definitely have a preference for one door.
Yeah.
We did prototype that where basically we fill the inner through one of the inner gets filled with the vestibule, and it gives you a lot of space, and it's almost not even heavier because you can get rid of some of the zippers on the fly in the inner.
I see.
The downside is that now there's a certain way you got to pitch it. So instead of just like pitching it, you have to think about it. And then this might be me being irrational, but I feel like people are going to be weirded out a bit by having a pole in the living space. Even if we anchor it, I don't know. I just like, what I don't want to do is make something that's weird. So what
Yeah.
I do think we might do. So then one other thing is that depending on the overall popularity of the product line, we can add more versions because you've got like minimum production runs and things like that. If it's wildly popular, you can do like every possible version. If it's less popular, you can't like make 4 different versions because you have to make like hundreds of each.
Right. And then you're flirting with like oversaturation of an idea where you're trying to be 1% different, but you
Mhm.
actually go backwards and you saturate it to the point that it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like you have too many options, and then you create
Right. Yeah,
uh,
you create a weird one and kind of tarnish
buyer
things.
fatigue in trying to make a decision.
Yeah, like right now, people will say like they like the Pro tent how it's so light, but they still like the polyester price of the regular, so they want like a single wall in polyester, and it's like,
Ah,
okay, but that's only going to be like a little bit lighter than what we have now in the double wall. So it's like it's in between, and you're like, could you just like, yeah, it's like how thinly do you want to slice it?
do a 1.5 X mid single wall polyester. Split the difference.
Yeah, there's just so many options. What we might actually do is create an inner tent that is like a 1.5, like it fills one vestibule, and it would fit with our double walls. And then that would actually anybody with the one person tent, if they want to make it bigger, they can buy this separately to make it a 1.5, but it's not like one of the headline core models. So it's not like we're kind of, it's just almost just on our spare 10 parts page for those people that want it.
Yeah, yeah, that
And
makes
we
sense.
are planning on a like a Dyneema double wall version.
Oh, cool. That'd be
So
neat.
yeah, so that'll be our tents are a little more like mix and match now in the sense that you can buy the tent, of course, but then we have a spare tent parts page where you could buy the fly from our solid series with the inner from our mesh series, or you could combine different pieces. And once we have the Dyneema fly, then you could be like, I want the Dyneema fly with the solid inner or with the mesh inner, and
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
make kind of what you want. So
Or
that,
just go fly only with a
yeah,
broadsheet and really go light.
yeah, the fly only is cool. We don't really market it as like that because it's like I think it's a smaller market, but I
Yeah,
think it's awesome. Like it calls to me, especially outside of bug season. It's like it's just so simple. Our
yeah.
tents work great for ski touring too, where you're not gonna have an interior tent. But again, we just like I don't have time to like we don't really market towards anything, so certainly aren't marketing towards that.
I know you keep things kind of tight-lipped
Hmm.
with your designs until you're ready to launch and release and start taking orders. But I know that there's a lot, since we're talking about tents and new designs.
Hmm.
The X Dome
Hmm.
is it's on the website and
Yep.
there's limited information and it's been teased and such, but what are you willing to share about the X Dome aside from it'll be available around this time? Like give us a little tease if you can of what
Yeah.
might be happening with that.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's amazing. So the story is our first XMID patent back in 2019. We've been kind of talking about it for a long time. The patent from 2019 actually mentions that you could take this floor plan and you could put traditional tent poles on that floor plan, and there would be advantages to that.
Okay.
Just in the bulk of it, it's not like we patented that. It's just like we
Oh, sure.
mentioned it as part of the story, and then we've sort of mentioned over the years that we're working on it, but like keeping it to our chest because it's complicated. And so I think about 2 years ago, we had a tent that I was like, it kind of was like done in the sense that we went through the process of designing something and we refined things and here's the product. But I didn't think it was good enough. Um, it has some really cool things, but it had some problems too. And I was
Okay.
like, aspects of it that, yeah, they just weren't the user experience that I wanted. And so I had still working on it, but I was like, I didn't want to release it like that. I was like, we need
Hmm.
like one more like good idea to solve these problems.
Okay.
And we haven't released like much information about it because we just have like other companies kind of looking at what we're doing. But we did last year. Last year I had like a really cool idea that I think really changed it. And we're like, okay, like now it's awesome because now it's like it was good before. It was going to be like, oh, it does all these cool things, but there's these downsides. Now it's just like everything it does is like awesome. I'm excited about it because I really think it's going to be this like no brainer tent in the freestanding space. Some things,
Okay.
there's some obvious things about it that will be like you would expect from us. Like, of course, it's going to be a polyester fly. We're like huge advocates for polyester. Of course, it's going to pitch fly first. But there's a lot of other things too where I just think that compared to what's on the market today in that freestanding space, so it's not targeting those like crazy light freestanding tents that do some weird things like a Nemo Hornet, like great tent, but it's like semi freestanding, big cutouts on the fly. So there's like some trade-offs in protection. This is like a fully freestanding, like full protection type of like tent. And then I think it's going to be like substantially more stormworthy, user friendly, simple, and just like a better user experience.
Gotcha.
And hopefully lighter than kind of what's out there.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question is what kind of weight class area are we looking at for, because a
Yeah.
double wall fly first
First version would be
freestanding 2-person and 1-person option from what I've
yeah,
heard,
2 and 1
right?
double wall polyester, and then I would like to do a Dyneema version too, like a pro version, but that would be down the road, like in another year or something like that.
Sure.
So it would be targeting tents like in that class of like Nemo, Dragonfly, the Big Agnes, Copper Spur,
Slingfin portal, that
yeah,
kind of idea.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You're kind of like full freestanding tents that aren't like making any weird compromises to really get that last bit, but just like a great all around type of tent.
When can we expect to see it available for like pre-sale or whatever?
Yeah, it's done. The design's done. It's signed off. I'm so excited about it. It's so cool. We haven't decided on a launch date, but it's still a few months, like probably September. Yeah, plus or minus like a month or two, basically.
So
So
not actually that far off.
it's not
That's
that far off. No, which has me like feeling not dread's not the right word, but product launches are so hard because we don't know how to do anything. Like I'm just like self-taught. So we're like making videos. You film this wonderful product video and your mic's not on, and then you film it again.
yeah.
And you're like, it was rubbing in your collar, and you film it a third time, and you look annoyed because it's the third time, and the product photos take for. Anyways, yeah, launches are hard. I need somebody that can, do some media stuff. But
It just sounds like a ton of work, and I don't envy you for that. I know what goes into that process of releasing new products and the
yeah,
amount of stress, and then it's like, okay, it's out there. I hope people love it.
yeah, yeah, and that's kind of
So
like one of the hard things, like with kind of what you were saying about following up on the success of the XMID is I do think we can make great products. I'm not like that intimidated on. As I mentioned, I think the design space is pretty wide open and we can rethink some of these things. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to make better gear, but whether it's going to actually like take off and be well received and get that kind of critical momentum, I don't know. We don't have any advertising. Like it kind of almost feels out of my hands because it's just grassroots. People are excited. They tell
right,
people. So you put it out there and you hope that people are stoked, and so far it's been great, but maybe the tent, it's only me that's stoked. Who knows?
Yeah, and you just did have a product release.
Mm-hmm.
We've already talked about the Iceline poles a little bit, but maybe we can dig into that for a few minutes because I am also very interested in talking about the Wapta backpack
Right.
and that relationship with working with a new fabric that is pretty much like not as well known. So we'll get into that here in a second, but
Okay.
like the idea of you working on some really cool poles, but then also working with Comperdel, right?
Yeah.
To help produce them, and which I mean they're a very popular high quality product, which I think just adds a lot of value from my perspective as a consumer of, oh, it's not just Dan trying to make something with like a random factory and produce
Yeah.
whatever pole, like you've also got the
Like the expertise and history and
expertise and also the trust.
right.
There's another
Right.
word I'm trying to think of, but like that trust aspect of like, oh, Compradel is you can trust them to make
Right.
a
Right. They're
quality
legit
product.
and they've been doing it for over a century. So it's like, obviously,
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously they
So
have a pretty good
how
idea.
did that come together with that relationship?
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of doing the things that we can like do well. So we don't produce in house because like that would be a massive amount of work. And like, I'm not good at sewing. I can sew, but I'm not like, I mean, we couldn't hope. We live in a tiny little town. I couldn't hire enough people to sew if I wanted to. Like, it would be all consuming on sewing, and that's not like my passion and focus. And then, and then for like other things, I try to like bring what I can bring, which I think is like I need the two ends of that spectrum of like the first principles. Here's the foundation, and as a user, like here's where I want to get to in terms of like, does this, does it? There's intangibles like you have your foundation, but there's intangibles like is this lever like feel nice, and does the finish look good, and does it satisfying and things like that. So with Comperdale, I had a friend who is a gear designer for G3. They do like winter gear. He used to
Oh
be
yeah.
head of product design there, but he connected us with Comperdale and made that introduction. And that's great because then you can take advantage of their expertise in all the things they've already solved. Like how do you produce carbon? Like I would be, figuring that out for years, and
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
good at it. So why do we need to reinvent the wheel on that? We can start from where they're at and just make the changes that we need to. I had been thinking about poles. I mean, partly because it's this natural add-on for a trekking pole tent. It's like everybody kind of needs them, but I didn't want to do mediocre ones. And then I was thinking about it. I almost just like didn't think about it for a couple of years because I was like, surely poles are just exhausted for ideas. Um, and I already kind of explained the sales pitch on the ice lines, but I'm like, how has nobody done a three piece with one adjuster? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, I mean, they probably have. Like, I'm sure, like 2 weeks from now, somebody's going to email me and be like, "Ah, here it is." But even if somebody has, it's not a popular design. So,
Well, and I think it's actually a bit more narrow. You've clearly done way more research than I have on
mm,
polls for you to be able to put a poll out there. But
mhm,
I kind of look at it in three categories. You have the billions of OEM white label polls that are out there.
billions.
That's like
Yeah, yeah,
it's a lot. It's like, oh, here's this new company that came out with polls, and it's like that handle is on 17 other brands. Like there's
yeah,
nothing unique about that. But then
yeah,
you look at brands like Black Diamond and Lucky,
yeah,
and they're doing things that are different,
hmm
but they're also to like a premium level. And Black Diamond may be more in like the trail running space with their
yeah,
poles and less like hiking centric, even though they do make hiking specific poles. But then there's Lucky that I kind of view them more in the winter sports realm
hmm
of like
yeah.
alpine ski
See that?
touring. And so you have all these like pole categories. And then there's Compradel that they've been making poles, like you said, forever, but they're harder to find in the US. And so like there's this space of, yeah, maybe it's exhausted, but the availability or something that is more like targeted to the end user for that product may not be available. And that I think is where the ice lines have slotted
Yeah,
themselves as an opportunity. At least that's how I've
yeah.
kind
I
of
hope so.
viewed that.
There, as you say, there's so many like generic white label poles. You can get them for like $60, and you're kind of like, is somebody really going to spend more for like something better? And at first, I was like, I didn't think maybe like you can make it better, but better enough. First, I
Right.
didn't really think
Right.
so, and now I'm like still the cheap poles are fine for most people, but if you want like high performance, there is actually like another level, and I think we can offer that.
And those are now available.
Yeah,
And
I've got one. I think I
let's
got one on the
yeah,
second corner
let's see
here.
it.
Yeah, um, yeah, I love them. They got like this cool matte finish. I don't know if you can see it too well. The carbon even has this like modelly look to it. It's like raw carbon. It's like it's finished, but and then the quick connect that saves the weight is like it's got a flush mounted button, so you're not gonna like you can't press it. Like if you hit
Gotcha.
like a spike or something, you could obviously, but like just
Gotcha.
bang it against a tree or something, you're not going to hit the button. And then one of the hardest things was not having rattle in the connection. There are some other
Mm,
quick connects, but they're using a central cord, and that's putting
okay.
tension on it, so it's holding it together. This, because there's not a central cord, if there's any slop here, it can like kind of drop down by the amount of slop, and then when you plant it,
Gotcha.
it pushes back up, so it's kind of going in and out every step. So we had to remachine these, and they have these little O-rings that dampen the connection and add friction, so it doesn't move, and then it just has this like, it feels like kind of a soft close on a kitchen cupboard or something. Like it's just fun geeking out. Like we literally, I was shocked when I learned how much glue goes into putting a grip. I was like, seriously? Like you guys are putting like 10 grams of glue? Like that's like 8% of the pull. So we like made the grip tighter and we like cut the glue in half. I mean, they seem like they're on there good. Time's really going to only tell, but just things like that. Where like, is nobody like, why doesn't your grip fit tighter? Like that seems like something you should do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
super
matte finish
interesting.
stays weight. So yeah, it's a fun geeky thing. And I'm just excited that it ended up being like there was things to do in this product space. Because and just coming into it was like, it's probably all been done.
And there's straps coming on the version 2.
Yeah, all the strap crowd. Yeah, that's easy. Yeah, we had straps on prototypes. It's not like it's hard. We just tell them to put straps on the next batch.
Yeah.
There'll be both.
I'm in the camp of no straps. So
Like,
I'll put my check mark on the no straps camp.
yeah, it was so polarizing. Like if you look at our website and our product video, we don't even mention straps. Like there was no like big argument on like you're doing it wrong with straps or anything like.
Right.
I
Right.
am fairly agnostic on the strap front. I don't personally don't use them. If somebody does, that's cool. There's no argument against them on our website. And yeah, we'll have that option next
I like
batch.
it. Yeah. Way to listen to the, I guess, drama, quote unquote.
Yeah, it was a lot of
User feedback
yeah.
before they got into people's hands, which I find interesting. But okay, with the limited time that we have left, I'm very interested in this. Let's talk about backpacks
Hmm.
and the Wapta as your newest backpack option. You've had the Kakawa for a bit of time now. You had a previous model
Hmm.
before the Kakawa, and so what intrigues me about the Wapta is, and I'm saying that right,
Yeah, you are. Yeah, perfect.
is the fact that everybody right now seems to be team challenge sailcloth. Like
Hmm.
you're using Ultra 200 for the build of your Kakawa. It's an amazing fabric, but you're not using Ultra for the Wapta.
Yeah,
You've partnered with a brand called Alula using a fabric called Graphite,
that's right. Nailed it. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So I'm not like I love to nerd out on textiles. I think the textile industry is fascinating. There's so many
Hmm.
interesting things that you can do with like fibers and thread and create high performance stuff. Like that's just it's
It's
wild to
amazing.
me that
Yeah.
it's you're able to do that. What can you share about like why Alula? What's unique about Graphite and different from Ultra or even Dyneema, just
Hmm.
the ultra high molecular yada 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 fiber that just is dominating the space right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I am definitely a big fan of that fiber, the Ultra PE. It's the fiber itself is the real deal. But then in a fabric, there's like a whole bunch of other things that go into it. Like with hybrid DCF backpacks, they get sort of touted as being Dyneema, and we use a ton of Dyneema in our tents. But the hybrid DCF is still, the exterior is just polyester, so it's fine. It's not
Right,
like bad, but
right.
it's just like it feels a little misleading to like kind of 15 times stronger than steel when really the only component that is like that is like fairly small amounts on the interior. So with Alula, the way it came about was that I was at a conference. I guess this was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, but they were presenting at a conference, and they're another Canadian company. They're here on the west coast of Canada too, so it's kind of aligned from a like geographical kind of story standpoint. But
Okay.
also we are a brand that's direct to consumer, so we can move quicker. We don't have to have like a product done to show to retailers who are going to order it for like the next year. It's like
Right.
we can
Right.
do a product, we can launch it on a pre-sale, it shows up, we can do that in a more compact time frame. So they wanted to partner with us, I think partly because we were like two exciting companies from Canada, but also just because we could actually get something to market, and they're excited about their technology, and so they wanted to get it to market, and we were one of the companies that could do that quicker while having the scale to actually use a factory, and not because some of these things take a lot of like machinery and heat bonding and lasers and all that kind of stuff. So that was why the partnership kind of made sense, but it still had to be a fabric that made sense. The original fabrics they use for other things are pretty like stiff and crinkly. So originally when they sent me some fabrics, I was like, yeah, cool. Yeah, maybe I'll get back to you kind of stuff.
Mm.
They were more pushing harder than me at the start because I was like, yeah, it's kind of weird. It felt like too shiny and kind of crunchy, like almost like maybe you do a duffel bag out of it, like those
Oh,
Patagonia
okay.
black hole duffels that
Sure. Sure.
are so shiny. I think they just changed to not being shiny this year. But anyways, when I think of shiny gear, I think of those black hole Patagonia duffels.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but anyways, so they came up with a version 2 that is much better. And the cool thing with that is that they're taking so we like all these fabrics. We use Ultra 200. What they've done with Ultra 200 is they've taken about 2/3 Ultra PE, mixed it with 1/3 poly, so they can stick the film on because the film doesn't stick to the Ultra PE. And so
Right.
there's polyester in there, there's glue in there, the film in there, and it works pretty well. But you're still only gluing the film to like 1/3 of the fibers, so it's not. It works. It's just maybe not 100% of the way to like what could be done. So with Alula, what they've done is they've solved how to. I don't know it's proprietary. I don't like know that. I'm under an NDA, but I also genuinely don't know how they do it. Um, but they have like a film that's in the polyethylene family and a weave that's ultra PE, and I think they're basically like melting it on there in some fancy type of melting or something.
I
So
see. I
the
see.
advantages are that now you're at 100% ultra PE instead of 2/3. There's no glue, which is a component of the weight, so you can put more of the weight into the other components. And then also the films have a higher fatigue factor. So if you like take some of the pet films that are in like Dyneema and you like crinkle them a million times, they can start to crack. This is
Right.
like much better for not fatiguing. So it's even more expensive, but it does, I think, take something that was like really good and move it even further. And then aside from just like trying to get as much ultra PE in there as you can, the other thing is because it's kind of melted right in, it's edge stable, so it's not going to unravel, which can
Okay.
be an issue with ultra because it's a fairly loose weave. So like on our ultra backpacks, we'll use a larger seam allowance because you can have the edges unravel if you don't put them in as far.
Right.
Whereas Alula
Right.
is kind of the opposite. It's like melted together. It's never unraveling. And so that lets us laser cut so we can do like cool details. There's so much you could do. Like we laser cut like the daisy chains. We call them daisy chains. They're not really, they're a new type of thing, but they're attachment systems. But we
Yeah.
laser cut
Yeah.
details. We can do heat bonding because you can basically just like melt on more. And so you can put your reinforcements, you can make things more waterproof. So there's a lot to be done, and I kind of like go into some shops sometimes and I see these like Arc'teryx stuff and I'm like, man, they're really good at construction. I'm like, compared to the Arc'teryx, our stuff looks like a bit rudimentary. I'm like, so that was kind of one of it too. I'm like, man, like I'd love to like be at that level of excellence. And so I mean,
And
and I
they've
think that,
provided the opportunity for you
yeah,
to look at that, because I remember with my time at Waymark, sitting behind my desk and sitting with Mark and talking like, how do you achieve that next level? You're producing in house.
right,
How do you be just a little bit different, produce something that is not the cookie cutter of what everybody else is doing? And I think it is within that vein of what you're describing here, of you almost have to partner with somebody that has the expertise of being able to do something that you're not capable of doing,
right,
to make it like that much different. And I think like
yeah,
those laser cutouts and stuff of those daisy chains, those are like, might get overlooked as minuscule details, but I look at that and I'm like, nope, that's like that looks high end. That feels high
right,
end. That looks like something that had a lot of intent to it, and it's not just an afterthought.
right. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I also feel like for packs that I'm like, man, there's so much that could be done. I feel like PAX, like the next decade is going to be us like taking steps. More so like for other products like the Iceland poles, I'm like so stoked about them, but I'm like, am I gonna like, how much more is there that we could do? Like, I feel like, we've kind of done it. I'm sure we'll think of more, but like, it's not going to be drastic, I don't think. But PAX, I'm like, man, it's just like wide open because there's such a complex product and there's just so many,
Yeah.
the landscape is pretty wide open.
So are we likely to see the Kakawa get an update and move to Alula, or will that continue to fall in the challenge area?
What I don't want to do is kind of rush something where if we just
Or
took
maybe
the
even
Kakawa,
alienate?
yeah, there's that, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to just like shoehorn Alula into the Kakawa because we couldn't take advantage of it, in the sense that like if we put it in there but we're not heat bonding and we're not laser cutting, we're just kind of using the fabric, then you get some benefit. There's a little bit more ultra PE, but you didn't like really design it from the ground up to be optimized.
I
So
see. I see.
probably what would happen would be that we would come out with like a premium pack line, like the CAC was already a premium pack, but like a super
Sure.
premium pack line that would be like a WAP to 50 that would have a
Oh,
frame.
okay.
And
Gotcha.
so, and then that would be like your CAC was your like 275 pack and your WAP is like your 375 pack, because we're going to be doing all the heat bonding and the heat welded air mesh on the back panels, and it's going to be waterproof, and maybe a carbon fiber frame, and like all these, like I'm not working on it right now. Like don't, everyone's like cancel Leo, but
It's not happening. It's not happening.
but
Speculation.
yeah, but I think there is an opportunity. Like I basically want to do it from the ground up this year. The WAP to 30s just shipped in the last few weeks. We're going to listen to feedback, see if there's any problems, see if it performs like we expect. Because some things in the real world can be different, where like it tests well on a certain test, but that doesn't represent the real world that well. So if we see what we can improve, and then maybe next year, but that's coming up pretty fast. So it might be more like fall 2025 or something. Maybe we'll have a WAP to 50.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll hold you to it.
Okay.
Just I find, like I said earlier, the textile side of things really interesting, but what I keep hearing and everything that you're talking about really does come back to those first principles of design. And I think for some people it'd be easy to say, oh yeah, we love the graphite product, let's just use it and switch over on the Kakawa.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing you saying is no, because you're skipping steps without applying something to what it is really meant to
Yeah.
be
You're
used
not taking
for.
full advantage of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd
Yeah.
like to
Which I
really,
think I respect your mindset of that, even though it probably elongates the release of new ideas and new opportunities and things, where it's like, oh, the easy road would be to just take advantage of this, but no, we're not going to do that. So I like that.
yeah, it's hard when stuff takes a while to market. Um, you just want to get it out there right away, but you also want to do it right. So yeah, it's hard. And there's always somebody else that could like rush it to market and beat you and stuff. But a flip side of all this is that there's like, from a design standpoint, you're like, what's the cool thing? What do we want to do? But then there's like marketing, which is kind of like lame. Like I'm not into like pushy sales and all that kind of stuff. But you're like, if everybody wants challenge, you're like, hey, we could just do challenge and it's a slam dunk win, and we sell the product and it's great. But then you also want to have kind of like integrity as a company, where you're like, yeah, but if we could do something even better, not that it in any way is challenge like not great, we love it. It's just like, if there's a next step, I kind of think about this like with Arc'teryx. I feel like I was a little disenfranchised with Arc'teryx back in the day because there were so many cool membranes coming out, and they were just like
Mm-hmm.
totally hitched to Gore-Tex, which is like
Right.
good, but you're like, yeah, but there's like Event and there's like these other ones, and I would love to see them as innovators in the space, staying at the forefront of technology. But it seemed like they were staying at the forefront more of marketing, and like everybody wants Gore-Tex, so you're going with what's going to sell, and that's a risk. Like, are you really going to like release a brand new fabric that nobody asked for when
Right.
there's
Right.
another fabric that everyone is asking for, and then you
Yeah.
have to stand up for it and explain it and convince everybody, and it's an uphill battle.
Yeah. And then you're also toying with the lottery of brand loyalty and name recognition, and whether or not like that other name is marketable, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
interesting. So so many rabbit holes and things that we could go down, but we've reached the end of our time together, and just want to say thanks for sharing your brain dump here of ideas and your philosophy and how you approach things with Durston Gear. And you've got some pretty cool things coming up here in the forefront over the next few months that I'm pretty excited about myself. So I personally
Yeah.
love freestanding tents, so
Mhm.
I'm excited about what the X Dome is going to provide. And who
Yeah.
knows?
Thanks, Devin. I'm really excited, and I just want to say a big thanks to you for the podcast and to all our supporters and fans. Like, because this is totally grassroots. Like, it really is grassroots. We don't have like a secret marketing guy with ads or something. Like, it's all grassroots, and I'm so fortunate to be able to design gear, which is just made possible by people being excited. So, thanks to people checking out our gear and telling their friends, and yeah, it makes it all happen.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks.
I want to thank Dan again for his time. Check out links down in the description for some of the items that we talked about in the interview today. Check out Durston Gear. Great company, great products. Dan's awesome. And give it a thumbs up. Share it if you like. Hit the subscribe button. We'll catch you on the next one. See you guys.